Welcome to Bird Podcast. I'm Shobha Narayan. If you follow birds on Instagram, then you must follow Lynx Editions, a Barcelona-based natural history publishing house that has just come out with its magnum opus entitled All the Birds of the World. The title says it all. Today, our guest is Josep Del Hoyo, one of the founders as well as the directors of Lynx Editions. He has been an editor of the 17-volume Handbook of the Birds of the World series, and he is an author of the HBW and BirdLife International illustrated checklists of the birds of the world in 2 volumes. He has most recently authored the book that I mentioned, All the Birds of the World, which presents every bird species in a single, fully illustrated volume. Josep has been a driving force between these and many other projects at Lynx, and he's always motivated by his passion for nature, books, and conservation. Welcome, Josep.
Thank you very much. You have done I feel very happy with your presentation. I hope I hope I'm at the level of this very nice presentation.
I have seen snippets of the book that is the latest one, ABW, as you all call it, or All the Birds of the
Yes.
World book. How did you put it together?
Well, this is a book that I would say that has a trick, because you cannot do a book like that with 20,000 drawings and all the species, etc., starting from scratch. That would take many years. That would take enormous investments that would imply having a retail price for the book much higher. This price is quite reasonably priced. And all this has been possible because we didn't start from scratch. We were adding more work to the last 30 years of our life, my life, and the many other people that have been participating. And because we spent more than 20 years doing 17 volumes of all the birds with a lot of text, with many photographs, then we did 2 volumes updating all the taxonomy. Then doing this, the record or the milestone is to put all together crammed in a single volume, even if it's a big volume, more than 900 pages. But this was the difficult thing. But as I said, this is based on the work of almost 30 years and is the only way, because we had already done most of the illustrations. We still had to do several hundred new ones, but that's very different to have to order 20,000 figures, are very expensive, etc. So that's why I say there is a trick, because without all that previous things, we could not do this product.
You have traveled to many continents to document birds, Josep, and I have followed your videos on many social media channels. Can you talk about some memorable species and places? Since this is heard by bird lovers all over the world, I think you
Yeah.
are a great guide for this.
Well, there are so many great places and so many great birds, and that is the kind of question that is always more difficult for me. But I want to start by thinking of India, for instance. I have had great times in India. I've traveled many times to India. I think more than 10 times. I must have been close to 1 year of my life in many parts of India. And I have some memorable thinkings of all those experiences. I remember, for instance, one of the most special birds that I wanted to see in India was the forest owlet. And this was kind of specific trip going to Melghat Tiger Reserve in central India, and looking for it, and not so easy at the beginning, and then responding to our calls with playback. Finally, guided by the sound, we could approach. We saw the bird very well, and finally I got quite a nice video, and the bird was calling, and so that was very memorable. I have another one, thinking of India, that is a bit more sad, because this was 20 years ago in 2001. And there was a population of the Siberian crane that used to winter in India. There were three populations. Siberian cranes, as the name implies, breed in Siberia, but then when they go south to spend the winter, there were some in the west that is almost finished now, the wintering in Iran. There was the central population that was wintering specifically in such a nice and easy place to go as Bharatpur, the Keoladeo National Park. And this was the place where most birders at the time were seeing these species. And there were 6 birds. The next year there were 4, then 3. And in 2001 there were 2. And this was sad, but at the same time they were singing, and I could also film quite, for me, historical videos because they never came back. These were the last 2 individuals. So some are happier than others, but luckily then later than that, when we our feeling with this extinction of the Indian population was that practically all the species was going extinct because the eastern population, the one wintering in China, had not been discovered yet. So there was some kind of good news later because a population with more than 1,000 individuals was found. So I also went to see the ones in China. And then memorable, well, I have many. Preparing the handbook, I have to go to many museums. Every year I spend several months in museums, mainly in the United States and in Britain, where there are the bigger ones. And I remember preparing the giant ibis, the biggest ibis in the world, very big bird, very impressive. And we were seeing these specimens in our hands that were so big. And we were saying, and this is extinct, because that is what was believed at the time, that these species had gone extinct forever. But maybe 8 or 10 years after, the species was rediscovered in Cambodia, when Cambodia became a very good destination for birding and nature watching, because there are still good mammals also, like in India. And this was a bird that I never thought, so I had experienced its extinction. And then one day at 3 a.m. in the middle of night, going with local people, following dark night, and very slowly, not to make noise, we were put below a tree with all dark, knowing that there were at least one bird roosting in that tree. And then it started to get some light and more light, and there is a shape, it looks like an ibis. And slowly the light was coming. When there was enough light for me to be recording this in video, the bird called, woo, and then 3 more came. So this was wonderful. And I could tell you lots of experience in many islands. When I went to New Zealand, I had the privilege to be awarded a special permit to go to look for the kakapo, the biggest terrestrial flightless parrot of the world. And this was, I could fill the interview with spectacular experiences because of the birds and nature are great, and I've been lucky to be able to be a witness.
Yes, but please do everybody thinks South America is where Colombia especially is a great place for birding. But would you agree? And there was this two things I want to ask you. One is you are a specialist for breeding birds. There's this lovely video of ruffs that are displaying. And
Yes.
so talk about for Indians, the Iceland and that part of the world is quite far away geographically. So
Yes.
what will we see there if we go? And also, what are some thrills in South America that you enjoyed?
Well, South America, because of the evolution of birds, there was a thing that happened many thousands of years ago, that there were created some what now we see as a big forest, the Amazon forest, the biggest area of forest in the world, that now it was united. Now we are destroying it quickly, and now it's again becoming patches. But 30 years ago, it was a single mass of forest. But thousands of years ago, there were climatic periods where there were many islands, and that means that the birds were evolving in isolation, because not all was forest, and most birds live in forests. It's the richest habitat for birds. So the birds were evolving in different lines. So many more species. The number of species, Colombia has close to 2,000 species. That is almost 20% and 19% of the world birds. So that's what happens in South America, that the numbers are astonishing. The numbers in India are also very big. Indonesia has a high number of birds. But in general, you go to a small country like Ecuador, which is like one of the states of India, the size, and you get 1,600 species of birds. So that's what is amazing of South America. You never finish. You may stay 1 month in a place and you still see new species. And then the Arctic is completely different, because if you go to a place in the Arctic, you see fewer species, but they are very special. You see all these shorebirds and waders that we birders all over the world are used to see in groups, wintering in the wetlands, running and feeding and all this. And then in the Arctic, the birds look like they had changed. They are not the same. They sometimes, well, normally their plumages are much more beautiful, not always like the ruff that is spectacular. The change is really spectacular, but they are all different, and their behavior is very different, and they make very special displays. And you see one male rising one wing up and all the time. So they forget about feeding, and they are only thinking on reproduction. So the males following the females and all this. So it's very different places. But you know, I'm not a specialist on anything. And that's something I enjoy very much, because that means that I like everything. So I go after everything.
Yeah.
So whoever is an expert in South American forest birds knows them better than me. And whoever is a great expert in Arctic also, and I learn from these people. I try to visit with good local experts. But I have this nice point of view that I'm the one that goes not as deep as the deepest possible, but deep enough to get a good idea. And so I'm kind of put them all together and have a global idea. And this thing I enjoy very much. So I'm not a specialist in anything, but I don't look down to any group of birds or to any aspect of bird life or whatever.
Are you drawn to a particular type of species? For example, pelagic birds versus, I mean, just as you as a person, are you drawn to?
No. When I was starting, I felt attracted by woodpeckers. Maybe because of the cartoons or whatever, but I like woodpeckers. But in general, as I was explaining, I am interested in all kinds of birds. So I can enjoy watching or looking for the subtle differences between Phyloscopus warblers that are almost very similar, but I enjoy with them. And then I enjoy with spectacular birds of paradise and with waders and water birds. And no, my specialization is no specialization.
I live in Bangalore, which is there is no sea around. So for me, pelagic birds
Ah,
are a unique, I mean, attraction. So this is a two-part question. How do you arrange your expeditions? So you've had some spectacular videos of pelagic birds. If you can use them as an example to tell us how you organize yourself so that you go and shoot them, um, what do you do in advance?
Well, basically, you have to spend quite a lot of time preparing the trips and looking what your targets are and where is the best place. But I have a good advice for inland bird watchers, as probably is your case, and it's that pelagic birds, which by the way are wonderful. It's not my specialty, but nothing is my specialty. But I enjoy it being in many places. The good thing is that the good areas to do pelagic birding are in general the best ones. There are in many more places, and you can see good pelagic birds almost any part in the world. Maybe the tropical seas are not that good, but when you go south or north, you increase the number and the varieties of pelagic birds. But particularly going south is where it's the richest. So if you go close to Antarctica, you get them all. Well, not them all, but you mean a very high percentage. But the good thing is that thinking in countries with sea and being in the south, I'm thinking in South Africa. Pelagic trips from Cape Town are very, very good one. Chile, Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, all these places, you get one pelagic. If you go there, don't take one, took 3 or 4, spend a few days. But in just one, you will see albatrosses, you will see shearwaters, you will see petrels, you will see storm petrels. So suddenly you have seen good representation of them all. So you don't need to do a big, unless you become a seabird freak, which I know several of them, then they go to the farthest place because there is one storm petrel that is a bit different, and they go, well, if you enjoy that, if you become like that. But if you want to get an experience and a general idea about how the pelagic birds are, just go one of these places, taking advantage of any other trip or whatever. In India, you can have, but India is too far north for you. Your waters are warm, are warmer than what these other birds like. But you have some tropical birds. You have boobies and you have terns. So there are always seabirds anywhere.
Do these pelagic birds have personalities? Because in your videos, there are some videos of them fighting with each other. They
Oh
seem
yeah.
like strong personality. What are they like? What are they like?
Well, nature is quite cruel, and the reality and what happened in you see in East Africa, that the lions kill the hyenas and all these things. This happens at sea, and one of these videos I did that was most impacting to me is one albatross had got a big fish, and two of a bigger species, two royal albatrosses came, and they were like going to the dentist. One was opening the beak and the other was pulling the fish until they got to the fish it all. So they are, yes, they are very, very aggressive, and sometimes they can be very impressive. Even you can feel fear if a bird like that attacks me, and they are so big. I've been ringing the wandering albatross, the biggest one, more than 3 meters from wing to wing, and I had like that, and really they are impressive. And seeing an albatross flying is something spectacular. Some famous person, I don't remember who was a writer or something, say there is two kind of human beings: those that have seen the albatrosses and those who haven't.
Well, I belong to the latter, I'm afraid,
Well,
and you
I
belong
hope
to the
one day you become to the first.
Tell us about the European bird breeding atlas that you were part of.
Well, it's a quite, I would say it's important. It's a very important book. It's an atlas, so it's covers all the species breeding in Europe. Europe, in quite broad sense, it takes almost 50 countries, including many parts of Russia, etc. And there are two things that make this book very special. One is that it's the second edition. So this book, more or less the same, with a bit difference in techniques, etc., was published the first edition in 1997. And now we got the 2020 second edition. So almost 23, 24 years have gone between them. So this book allows to to watch and to compare and to think about what changes have the birds done in their distribution, what birds are growing or their populations, which birds are declining, which birds are declining in one place and thriving in others, or other species that are declining everywhere. So it's very rich information work. It's a work with a lot of consequences in conservation. The other thing is that this book implied the participation of more than 120,000 ornithologists and bird watchers all over Europe. So I cannot think in another book published with so many authors, let us say, because they were in the field for long periods and getting information. So I think it's a really important work.
If you had to explain to a new birder or a bird lover about breeding birds, because you know them quite well, what are some, other than the fact that their plumage changes, if I had to tell a child, this is what's special about breeding birds, what are some things you might say?
Well, one thing that impresses me is the really wide different kinds of breeding strategies. You get the most typical one is what you mentioned. A bird, the male gets more beautiful and they change their mind and they go and they display in front of the females, and that's the typical. But there is also the opposite. There is reverted sex roles, and you have the phalaropes, for instance, where the bird that is the leading, the one that gets the beautiful plumage is the female, and the females are those displaying in front of the male, and the male just will mate with the female, and that's all that the female will do. Then the female will lay the eggs, and that male will male with more duller plumage and not so aggressive. They will take charge of all the care of the chicks who will never met their mother. So this is a strategy, and then you have many others. I am quite passionate about these parasitic birds that sometimes we think they are like bad people because they don't want to work. But anyway, from an evolution point of view, it's wonderful how these birds put an egg in the nest of another species, but the egg has the right colors to cheat the real parents of, and then the chick hatches, and they have the markings in the mouth that are the same of the host species, again to cheat, and these are prepared to grow bigger, and then they will probably kill or throw away the others. In some cases, no, they can go together. So it's the big number of breeding strategies that I find more interesting, because there are so many that again I could explain many other cases. The cuckoos is almost all the family. There are two or three genera that are not parasitic, that they do all the job normally, but most cuckoos, so it's not the cuckoo, is
The cuckoo family.
a few thousands of parasitic cuckoos. This is the most well known. But then you have in Africa, you have the waidas, that, and these birds, they are parasitic of specifically one species. It's not the case of the cuckoos. The cuckoos in general, the common cuckoo can parasite many different species, but the waidas are specializing in parasitize one specific one. Then in the Americas, you have the cowbirds. Also, the cowbirds are parasitizing birds that breed in colonies, that make pending nests, or opendolas, for instance, caciques. And there is one black man there that is checking and inspecting all these nests that the parents, the real parents, don't know what is this bird looking at, and it's looking to see which ones are at the right moment for my egg that I am forming to lie that egg there. So this would be. There are a few other cases, but these cowbirds, cuckoos, and white-oak birds, I think, is the best representatives of the cuckoos. But there is even a duck species, which is there is a duck species in South America that it lays the eggs in the nest of other ducks, and that's it. So there are odd examples in many places.
Lynx Editions has books about the birds of Philippines and Malaysia. I was struck by them because it is somewhat close to India. And I said, gosh, if there is a book specific for that country, it must be quite spectacular. So tell us a
Well,
little
yeah,
bit about
but
that.
India is very spectacular.
Yes, sir.
We can talk more about India. There are many things that I like about. I like very much the relationship between Indian human beings and and the birds or the nature in many other countries, particularly with the amount of population, the human population that you have. In many other countries, there would be half the species would have gone extinct. But Indians have a kind of innate respect for nature and interest that makes that you see people everywhere, but you see the sarus cranes going there and many other places you wouldn't have that. So India is a great place, and also has India has habitats that are very good for bird watching. Forests are, as I said, the richest, but it's more difficult to see birds in forests. It's more difficult, and uh, these kind of open places in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, these kind of places, not too dry deserts, but these kind of open places, kind of savanna, say similar to some parts of Africa as well. These are great. You enjoy, you spend the day there and you see many. By the way, we also published a field guide in 2 volumes for the Indian subcontinent, Birds of South Asia by Pam Rasmussen, is called the replay guide. So we have guides. We have published field guides for a number of countries. We would like to publish for all the countries of the world, or at least for most of them. But we have more for Asian countries than any other. So we started. You mentioned Malaysia. You mentioned
Philippines.
the Philippines, but we've done also Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. So we have a good number. And the special things, well, Philippines is a very special place because so many islands and so many endemic birds. It's one of the countries where the highest proportion of birds that you are seeing are endemics. You can only see them in the Philippines, and with so many islands, you have to visit a good number of islands. And the destruction of nature has been quite advanced there. So it used to be said that if you have to go to one place to see birds, go to the Philippines, because maybe 10 years later there won't be many birds still alive. The years have passed and the birds are still there, and some gone, and that some new populations are. So there are still some time, and I hope that people get the real importance of having so many birds for the whole of the world that only live in your country. So I like this the endemism of the Philippines, and including spectacular species like the Philippine eagle, before was known as monkey eating eagle, is the front cover of our book, the All the Birds of the World. So it's you see it. And so the endemics are not only a very small brown bird that is no, there are eagles, there are malcojas, there are ducks, there are many things that are. And what you mentioned, Malaysia, there's something also very special, that is a country with two sections. So one part you see in the peninsular Malaysia, and another part you have in Borneo, in the island of Borneo. And all the birds are similar because they are related, but are different because Borneo has been separated from the Malaysian peninsula for a very long time as well. So you go there and you see, oh, this bird is taking the role of that one in the peninsula. So you can see pheasants, for instance, that the form in in the peninsula is similar but different. And now the taxonomy is going more and more, making new species, splitting. So there was uh, the firebug, one species that used to be considered one, and now is two. The one in Borneo is one species, the one in the Malaysian peninsula is another one, and you have tens and dozens and many birds that have these difference. So each country has something very interesting. I mentioned these two because
Yes.
you mentioned, but if you
Yes.
mention another, I tell you something.
The whole show could be this. We had a guest who is a professor in India who works in the northeast of India, which you have visited as well. And
Assam, yeah.
yes,
Assam,
and I
Arunachal Pradesh.
yes, he works in Arunachal Pradesh, and I asked him. I asked all my guests, name some of your favorite bird species, and he said he loves the warblers of Arunachal in the eastern Himalayas, the warblers. So I know you love India, but because we have many Indian guests, I'm using the chance to ask you about other countries.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I try to be kind, because I like India and I have very good friends there.
Yes.
But yes, ask me about other parts of the world, no
Well,
problem.
in India, it's a country that looms large in our imagination is China, and it's a question for us: how are they managing their wildlife, and what are the nice species that you can see there? And I know you have been there many times.
Yes, there is something that attracts me from China, and I will explain you that. But the thing is that the kind of birds is quite good. China is a great country for pheasant. India is also good, but probably the number of different species of pheasants, I would say pheasants are amongst the most spectacular of birds. In China, you have the highest number. And one gets the idea that because China has evolved so much industrially, and wherever you go traveling in China, you see the people, the workers on the roads, on the build. So all the time is being built and rebuilt, and a lot of economic activity, etc. And you get the first idea is that they are not going to have any nature left, but they have. There are good reserves, etc. And I was explaining that there is something that attracts me very much in this, because I am so passionate about taking videos of birds. I've taken videos of more than 5,000 species in the wild. So this motivates me very much. And the Chinese have done something that I hope will be also followed in other countries. There is a little bit of that in Thailand, in India, in Asia particularly, but China is the best, and is the existence of heights for photography.
Yes.
Um, because in China there are more bird photographers than bird watchers. So you have these heights, incredible heights. Normally, a height is for one person, for two persons. Here in Spain, we have places for six persons, but you get heights in China for 60 people. every hole with the number, and you count, and 60 holes to look for. And then you see these pheasants coming, and they put the worms for the birds. It's really fantastic, and this allows you to see the bird so well that many more people becomes interested and becomes passionate, because one of the problems with birds is when you don't see them well, you cannot admire how beautiful, how interesting they are. And in these places is wonderful. So in a number of places in Yunnan, particularly in southwest China, also central China, there are lots of these places where you pay a small fee, is quite reasonable, and you are allowed to spend the whole day or the morning in one height. In one place, there could be 40 different heights.
Wow.
A few kilometers in 10 radius 10 kilometers radius of place, you can have maybe 60 hides. Quite amazing. I've been doing this also in South India with a friend there, El Host, that also has some. It's more rudimentary. He puts a line and a
Attached to
cloth,
it.
just
Yes, yes.
a screen, and you look from there, and you get also wonderful videos of a spurfall and of
This is in Hampi, I think. Was
what
it? Is this in South India in Hampi? Hampi, is that the place where you did this with the?
Hampi, I don't remember, but um, the name of the place is Tatekat. It's a bird sanctuary, Tatekat Bird
Yes,
Sanctuary,
yes.
and it's mainly this person, El
Mm,
Host,
mm,
that is very good doing that, attracting
mm.
birds. He has all the owls,
Yeah.
most interesting owls. He knows where they roost, so it's also a very good place. I'm now taking priority for places where there is people like that. That when you arrive, if you want to look for the owls yourself, you need quite a lot of time, and if you use the local knowledge and then you get friends and you share things, you learn much more. So I really like this.
So if I were to go to China, you would point me to Yunnan province first. You would say, go for, if you are a birder, where should I go in China?
Oh well, China is very big
Or
and
everywhere, I guess.
yeah, everywhere. But Yunnan is the special place of this hides thing. There are
Mm,
in many other provinces as well,
mm,
but Yunnan is the place. There is a town or a village. I'm not sure how they call it, but its name is Baihualing.
mm,
Baihualing. And in this place is where this kind of business of having hides for a very reasonable price for bird photographers is the place where it has flourished most. I spent a full week there going from hide to hide and then to bed and then to hide and hide, eat, eat in the hide to take advantage of all the time. That was a very special place.
What about birds of paradise? I mean, this has been the most. I mean, you had so many documentaries about them, but I would love your take on it because you have a different way of.
Well, of course, I was very intrigued by Birds of Paradise before having seen any, but of course we all have seen them in TV, and it's quite a special thing, no? Because is because of the very special conditions of the New Guinea island that has rich forest with a incredible amount of food and no predators for birds like birds of paradise. So this is very special conditions that have implied that life for this kind of birds is very easy. You don't need to work very much. You you want to eat is plenty of fruit in the tree just below you and other things, etc. And you must not be very worried about a mammal that or a venomous snake that no there are practically no threat for these birds. So they can spend all the time displaying, and this has involved that evolution, the natural evolution, has give priority to becoming more and more ornamental. And if you have a feather from the point from the tip of your head, if it gets longer because of a mutation, you have a prize. The females will be more interested. So this plume is getting longer. Finally, they are ridiculously beautiful, but with all the respect, because they are impressive and very beautiful. So since I was young, I wanted to go. So first I went to Papua New Guinea. I saw there 30 something of the 45 or so species. Almost all are in this island, New Guinea. There are a couple in northeast Queensland in Australia, and there are three species, depending on taxonomy, in the Moluccas Island in Indonesia. And I visited all these areas also. So, and I've repeated. I went again to New Guinea, to the other part, to the Indonesian part, West Papua, and they are really spectacular. And again, the local knowledge is very important because these birds tend to do their displays in specific places. We call them leks, in a lek. similar
Peacock.
for peacocks, and so the local people knows where, and they have built a little cabin with a hole. So all these kind of thing, that's very important. If you want to find all the, you will see some. There will always find some, but maybe the position. So the position won't be very good to film. While these local people, they know several of each species, and they will take you to the one that is more accessible and that has less obstacles, etc. So, well, yeah, birds of paradise are something very special for world birders, let's say, for ornithologists and birders interested in all the birds of the world, which is my
Right.
case.
You bring up a point about planning. There, as you said, in India, there are a lot of passionate bird photographers. Um,
Yes.
what are some words of advice you? So, how do you plan your trips? Do you have a team that helps you go scout, find the local guides in advance, or so? What?
I have here at the publishing house, we have quite a number of people, and sometimes they help me. Amy, who you know, helps me always in all my trips and preparations and all these things. But in general, I like to do this part also myself as much as I can, because it's kind of work of community, you know. So the people in bird watchers, ornithologists, and particularly people who is interested in filming and videoing birds, we are kind of like a big family, a network of people, and we know each other, and we have met. Sometimes we haven't met, but we became very good friends anyway. So in general, I also enjoy doing these, being in contact with these people in many places of the world. So then you need to be sure that the person that you put the trip or the expedition in charge is, you can trust them. But again, even if you don't know them, you will know other friends who you trust that have been traveling with them. So I almost never had problems. There are local people, local guides that are more wonderful than others. But in general, people who decides to be a local bird guide is not a person who has very bad ear or very bad eyesight. So they are good in general. They sometimes are incredibly good. I spent a trip in Uganda with a person that they he was not, you know, that we use a lot of playback here. We record the calls of the birds and we replay for them to be interested. This man didn't need that, because he could imitate all the birds in a way that I always thought that's the real bird. No, it was me. Yeah, so it's also part of the big interest. Yeah, I always say that for me, birds are not only birds. If you are interested in birds, you learn about mammals as well. In India, imagine, I've enjoyed with the tiger and with the bears and so many things. You learn about plants, about trees, about forests. You learn about ecosystems. You become interested in conservation. You meet local people. You become friends. You try the local food, which I enjoy very much. In India, I like very much the Indian food. Even when I was going to the museum, I was explaining before in Britain, because I like much more the Indian cuisine than the British one. I was always going to, so my favorite restaurant in London is always an Indian one. And this is also part of the trip. So it's a combination of cultural, friendship, community, and of course nature and birds and conservation. Conservation very important. I think we people have the privilege to enjoy the birds, to know about them, etc. We must warn the rest of the people that we are doing many things very wrongly, and this will be bad for us, as is already starting to be.
We talked about pelagic birds and breeding birds. India is also a great place for raptors, but which are some of the other places that are good for raptors?
Well, raptors are everywhere. In general, you get raptors in these places like the Arctic. We were talking about there. You have the gear falcon, like kind of peregrine falcon, but much bigger. So everywhere you will get raptors. But there are two things that make raptors particularly spectacular. One thing is where there is lots of food for them, and it's not too difficult to see them. So the forest in Colombia or in the Amazon or the Congo Basin in Africa or these places, they have great birds of prey, but they are difficult. You see one day, the next day you don't see any, etc. In India, in India, I would mention another part of the world, East Africa, even South Africa. These places where there is not dense forest, the natural habitats are more open, like savanna-like, or even kind of going towards desert, arid places. You have in Gujarat, and these places are very good because you are traveling in the car and you see an steppe eagle there, you see a spotted eagle, and there are many. In one day you can see 30 individuals of birds of prey, and this happens also in Africa with also spectacular species like the crowned eagle, big species. So for me, this is one of the best things for birds of prey, is places where their abundance is spectacular. And this happens in India, this happens in East Africa, this happens in some parts of Australia. It's also not so many species, but also very impressive ones. And then with birds of prey, you get something very interesting that happens in some places, and it's the bottlenecks in migration. These places where because the birds of prey have a way of flying that they need thermals, the thermal current that help the birds to soar and move without spending less energy. They follow the lands. They try to reduce the sections that they have to travel over the sea, over open seas, while some passerines they don't care about that, but raptors do. And that means that in places where some straits become very thin, and this happens in the Bosphorus, between Asia and Europe, in Turkey. This happens in the famous Hog Mountain Sanctuary in the United States. In Mexico, you have Veracruz, where there are some kind of corridors where you look at the sky and you see hundreds and hundreds of birds at the same time. So these bottlenecks, we in Spain have our place for that, the Gibraltar Straits as well, and there are many others, some more spectacular than others. But then you see raptors. Imagine hundreds of sparrowhawks at the same time. You look, and the birds of prey follow. They want to fly over land, and the land becomes kind of corridor that force them to go through these places, like the Bosphorus Strait in Turkey and Europe, and in Gibraltar Straits in Spain. These places, they imply that hundreds of birds of prey are flying there at the same moment, and sometimes you see storks also, or pelicans. So these migration hotspots are really very special for birds of prey and more.
And this is because what you call bottleneck of migration is because these raptors try to avoid flying over open seas. So they choose
Exactly.
the place.
They look for the
Small.
places where traversing so going for, let's say, from Europe to Africa, for the raptors is much better to go over Spain and then go to Morocco, to North Africa, from a place where there is 14 kilometers of sea. So that is an effort, but it's 14 kilometers. But if you go through the Mediterranean, you have 200 kilometers. So they follow these places. So you can go to these places. You know the phenology, that is the dates, the month, even the days of the year where biggest concentrations are. You meet there with good friends from other countries in these places. And so in some of these places, there is a couple of weeks of the year that become kind of festival of migration and birds, and you meet people, and the local restaurants prepare special meals. It's quite nice also.
Uh, what are some little known birds that you might want to highlight that people ought to be interested in?
Well, we are always very impressed with some kinds of birds, birds of prey, birds of paradise, uh, storks, and all these things. And I like also to pay attention to what we call normally little brown jobs. These small birds that they are much more modest, and they are not so spectacular, and sometimes they are in danger, and they are suffering, and we don't pay so much attention, and they have also a lot of interest. In general, the best vocalization, the best singers of the avian world are many times passerines. That the famous nightingale, probably the species more used in poetry, and it is a little brown bird, but its ability to sing is spectacular, and has influenced the people. And I even believe that the creation of music was helped from the bird. So they are very interested. And I can mention a case which touches me especially, because one year, like 10 years ago, I filmed one of these birds, these little brown birds, that I knew was very endangered. It was the Alagoas foliage gleaner, an endemic bird of northeast Brazil. And 2 years later, another one was seen and now has been declared extinct. And I have a beautiful video of the bird singing. And so we must not forget the little brown jobs, that they are also very interesting, and they also deserve to be taken care of.
Where can listeners see these videos, or that, especially, for example, this one that you mentioned in Northeast Brazil? Where can?
Yes, these all my videos are in
Hmm.
in the eBird. You know eBird. There is
Oh, yes,
the
yes,
Cornell Laboratory of
yes,
Ornithology. They have eBird, which is the system of recording your sightings
yes,
and all this. And then
yes,
they have the Macaulay Library, where
yes.
you put photographs, sound recordings, and videos. So all my videos are there. It's very easy. You
Okay.
say explore media, and you write an species. You write Alagoas foliage cleaner. Well, of that species, you will see videos of just two people or something like that. But then you find them, and you can select by contributor, by species, by many things.
What
All
is the? How do you spell the first part of the
is
bird?
ebird.org.
No, no, no. The particular bird, the ala something.
Alagoas, which is a province of Brazil, or a state, Alagoas, foliage
Alagoas.
gleaner.
Clean. Yes, got it. Okay, that's great. And then, what about nocturnal birds? You have filmed, I mean, spectacular videos of nocturnal birds. Can you talk a little bit about that? About what moves you about nocturnal birds?
Well, it's a world of some kind of birds performing, making a living strategy very different to the others. They live in the night. They have developed these systems of flying without making any noise. So plenty of interest. But I must say that as I become older, I have something against the owl bird and the night bird, and it's that after a full day in the field following the diurnal birds, which are the highest number, then I cannot go to sleep because I have to go 2 hours to look for that Scops owl, or nighthawk, or whatever. So, well, this is a kind of joke, but sometimes in these trips, I remember a trip in the Philippines where the average sleeping time was 4 hours, and I was 40 then. I could stand that, but now I would not. So I need more time. One day I will do the diurnal birds. The next day I will rest a bit, and in the night I will go for the night birds. But they are very interesting. You have
Yeah.
great night birds in India again,
Yes. Yes, we do.
including
Uh,
forest owlet that we mentioned, and many others.
Correct. Last couple of questions. What advice would you give to beginning birders?
Well, first of all, I would advise them to be always very respectful with the birds and with nature in general. So, one thing is, if we are enjoying birds and we are enjoying nature, we always must take care of it. I encourage people to participate in conservation, to make members of local societies for the conservation of birds or whatever, and always prioritize the well-being of the bird. Not to get I disapprove very much some photographers that put a nest at risk because they want the photo so great that they are all the too long time too close to the nest, and then the parents can abandon the chicks. So that would be my main advice. Be always respectful. You are going to be rewarded because you are going to enjoy nature. You are going to have will learn many things, etc. But always put first the interest of the birds and nature. That would be my advice.
And for beginning filmmakers or photographers?
Well, for filmmakers, I'm very passionate about filmmaking, and I first advantage of making videos is that we are much less people than photographers. So there are many bird photographers that have exactly the same bird at the same branch. And
Yes.
while I'm the only one taking video there, so it's like more special. And now technology has evolved in a way that video has increased its quality so much that I can take videos, and if the situation is beautiful and spectacular, I can take a frame of the video, what I call a videograph, and make it a picture. And at the beginning, with a standard definition, even with high definition, that was how high definition, the quality was not that good. But now video is done in 4K, which is a lot of megapixels, let's say, a lot of resolution, and you can get very good pictures, still pictures. And on top of that, you are recording the voice of the birds. So I think it's my advice would be go for video, because now and photographers are now taking more and more videos, even if they are more photographers. Now they know that just changing a little button, they also can take video, and sometimes they are in front of a very interesting bird, and after taking all the pictures they want, they start getting video. So I'm very happy of taking videos of birds.
And if you had to suggest a particular gear or equipment for not a professional like you, but for somebody who is between sort of amateur and professional,
Well,
do you
the
have?
camera I use is not particularly expensive. Of course, these things are never cheap, but photography, if you want highest quality for photography, is very expensive, because this 600 millimeters lens, it's a lot of money, and the cameras are also very expensive. For video, there is this 4K kinds of Olympus, Panasonic, these kinds of frame, no, mirrorless cameras that are much more expensive. For something about $1,000 US dollars, you can get a camera that gets this high quality video, and at the same time they record voice. You need a lens but the lens is not, it's maybe 10 times cheaper than a big lens for photography. So I think that is another advantage of video. It's not only money, it's cheaper and it's much lighter. If you have to go with a 600 millimeters lens, and you have many kilos on top of you. My equipment for video is 1.5 kilos, something like that, and it's much cheaper. And I have to change camera is also less traumatic, let's say.
So, what do you carry on a regular basis?
Well, in the last 10 years or something, I have this camera by Panasonic that is called Panasonic Lumix. Now, and there was the GH3, the first that I had, then the GH4, and now there is the GH5. And since the 4, it's always 4K. That means it's 4 times more resolution than the what was called high definition. This is 4 times more, and you can get frames, video frames, good practically as a photo. as a still photograph.
And on top of that, do you use a lens or nothing needed?
Well, I used always carry a scope as well, but now I have a small good binoculars with me to help. But I'm using, because I have this, the lens that I use with the camera is 100 and to 400 millimeters, and it multiplies factor 2. So it means I'm carrying an 800 millimeters, and I use it also as a spotting scope. So with that, I can see the birds and I
Okay.
identify them, etc. And I don't receive any commission from the the commercial brands.
Yes. Any last words about birds? I usually ask every guest, tell us some memorable anecdote or tell us a bird or a species or a place that you still remember that comes up to the
Oh,
memory.
there are so many that I even those I forget.
Yes,
But I
I
think
was
my last
thinking
words
that.
I already said, and is I repeat very quickly. It's basically this thing that watching birds is not only birds. That is birds, mammals, butterflies, forests, plants, trees, nature, and then it start to become more with people, local ornithologists, local bird watchers, friends, in that you will keep, not all of them, but with many of them you will keep writing a lot of time, enjoying the culture, what you learn about how people live in each part of the world. As I said, I like very much food. So thanks to the birds, I've been trying so many wonderful kinds of food, in so special in all these places I've visited. So that's, I like this for my last words. Birds are not only birds, are much more. Dedicate to birds. You will learn lots of things and you will enjoy, you will be rewarded.
And on that note, Josep Del Hoyo, thank you very much for being part of Bird Podcast.
Thank you to you. I've enjoyed very much the conversation.
Bird Podcast is produced by Ullas Anand and Echo Edu. I'm Shobha Narayan. Thank you for listening.